Hello, MBA hopefuls. Welcome to another episode. It's episode 145, Spotlight on Post-MBA Careers Product Management. We're really excited to talk about this today. I am Bara Sapir, and I'm here with my co-host, Krithika. And
Hello.
we've got two amazing guests with us today to talk about project management. I just want to say, please give us a like and subscribe because it helps us to continue to do these episodes to give you lots of really important business information to apply to schools. And just want to say today we're going to be talking about the trends in product management. We're going to be talking about what skills that are going to get you into product management and how to leverage your MBA for this field in product roles. So I want to welcome our guests and have them give us a little bit of an introduction. So Giri, can you tell us who you are and where you come from?
Sure. So hey everyone. So I'm Giri. I studied at London Business School and did my MBA there in 2019 to 2021. So a couple of years out from graduation. At the moment, pre sort of my time at LBS, I was actually working in sort of products, but within a financial services context. And then use the MBA to pivot into the tech and media sector, where I'm currently now head of strategy and transformation at Sky, based here in London.
Great. Thanks so much for the intro. And Amol, you're up next. Tell us who you are.
Hi everyone. Hi, hello. I'm Amol. I'm a current MBA graduate at Kesavan Business School, Barcelona. The last 5 years, I worked as a product manager in a mobile gaming startup in India. Before that, I was in edtech and animation, but again as a manager. Now, in part, like apart from doing my MBA, I will start my internship in gaming in Paris, and that is again into product strategy and management.
Great. Thank you. So let's just dive right in. What is product management and how does it vary between companies? Who wants to take a first hit at this?
Yeah, sure. I can sort of kick off, and I think this is key to sort of start on this question, right? Because everyone thinks about product management in different ways. I think like for me, for sort of the work that I kind of do, it's really about being essentially sort of the CEO of something that you're building for like the customer, and it's always about the customer. And we'll talk about sort of customers a lot within sort of the product space, but really product management is about how you meet customer needs, and that is about through technology, and that for me is like the essence of product management. Very like different companies take on this challenge in different ways. So some companies, for example, like Amazon, you might find a mix of technical product managers and non-technical product managers. Other companies will separate out sort of the marketing function of products where you're advocating for the customer. That piece is separate from the actual core product management. So you end up with roles like product marketing management, which tie into sort of product management. Other companies such as Google tend to veer on the other side where it's a bit more sort of technical. So you're in to sort of the weeds of sort of what you're building. And also remember that within sort of the product sphere, as it were, it's not just about sort of product management, but multiple sort of other types of roles within product, like product strategy, etc., that all play a part in ultimately serving customer needs.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks. And Amol, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it also like depends on where your product is. If you
Exactly.
are in a company which is building new products, that then you might be focused on, let's say, user acquisition strategies. But if your product is in a life cycle where it's more mature, then it would be more on optimization, feature enhancements, and like sustaining more market share, like so on and so forth.
Makes sense.
I'd like to add, like, and I think one thing which people sort of get confused about when it comes to the product management is, it's less about sort of understanding, like doing what customers tell you they want, but it's actually a deep understanding of their needs. Like very nuanced, but that's such like a key difference when you think about sort of product. It's like what problems am I actually trying to solve for the customer, and that's sort of a key skill set and or mindset to sort of think about when looking at roles in the product space.
So now I know why I don't have flying cars yet in Bangalore traffic. um, but so I'm also going to think about the trends right now. So we all know what has been happening in the technology space for a long time. A lot of layoffs are being affecting product management and product roles. The question is like, is product management still sought after by MBAs? So Giri,
Um, I would
yeah.
just like to start because I'm currently studying and I'm ahead. It's a biased opinion because I have a lot of people who are studying with me. But I see a lot of people, especially who had earlier tech background, they really want to go and do product management because it can like bring out your skills of let's say tech and also including your MBA and your soft skills of has like how Giri said, like customer validation and seeing what customer wants and then trying to figure out what the customer needs and building those things. Currently, the tech landscape is a little tough. I'm sure Giri would have more details about this, but I think that it's still a sort of out after the field. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just sort of add, so a lot of what I was working on during my time at LBS is sort of how to pivot like the school into careers in like the tech and media and sort of product space and marry up sort of the skills of MBA students to prepare them for sort of careers in the area. I think it's sought after. A lot of people, like everyone wants to do it because it sounds like sexy as sort of a role, but to sort of the earlier point, fewer people understand like what it means as well, right? So by the time you end up with sort of a nice funnel of roles where people think they want to do product management, then actually sort of find out about it, and actually, their skills might be sort of somewhere else, or they might sort of think about other roles in product which are a bit more of a fit. So, for example, my role is actually more product strategy, not pure like product management, right? So it's a nice sort of mix of skills. So as always, like I think, like yes, it's a really really sought after role, but really sort of it depends. And I think this is where like from a pure like MBA sort of standpoint, this is where like the skills needed to get into the product sphere are so sort of diverse that actually um, it's a useful skill set for quite a lot of industries and quite a lot of roles as well, right? So I would encourage sort of folks not to just think about like product management as a title, but actually as sort of a mindset and a paradigm where you can go into a sphere of roles related into the product space.
That makes sense. So one of our colleagues, actually, Thomas, is really interested in knowing about the unique aspects that LBS provides to prospective product managers. And I think this is a good time, since you mentioned that you think schools need to pay attention to this more, and you've done so much work at LBS. So can you share a little bit about LBS in particular?
Sure. So, one of the things that I was really working on with the school is to really like bridge that gap, right? So you've got sort of a bunch of general management sort of MBA students, but what skills are needed in sort of the product space? So launching sort of new electives that tie into sort of elements of product management, such as design thinking or like innovation type topics, etc., or how you build like business canvases and ideate and all of these types of elements, as well as more fundamental courses in terms of what's happening in the sector, right? Such as like fintech, etc. So how do we think about the intersection of technology and sort of other industries? Because ultimately, from an MBA perspective, this isn't an engineering school, right? So there's no point teaching people how to code, but what you want to do is to teach people how to manage engineering, like manage technology rather, and harness technology to solve problems. And ultimately, like that's what product management is about. A huge element of this is also about data skills as well. Very much sort of an understated sort of requirement to be sort of a really effective product manager, I think. So, always think about like what are the key performance indicators you're trying to drive? Like how are you sort of moving the dial? What metrics can you measure? How are you sort of measuring that? And courses where you're storytelling with data using things like SQL, etc., and how you convey that and advocate in things like stakeholder presentations and so on. All of these skills are sort of areas that we focus on and are really really useful for sort of product management. But they're not only useful for product management, it is also useful again for like actually a multiple sort of array of roles, right, that are related to sort of technology management in general?
I want to put that question to you as well, Amol, because you came into Asade having all of this project management experience. And what did Asade offer you or offer students that didn't have that experience coming in?
So Isade does it like two different ways. There are career acceleration programs, which are specifically focused for, let's say, technology or consulting or finance. So the technology career acceleration program had a lot of talks about product management and new technologies and AI and fintech, for example. Then there are a lot of courses. So, as Giri said, courses about creativity, innovation. There's an elective about just product management. So, if you can pick and choose, if you really want to go that path, there's a set pattern of electives that you can choose, which will tell you what skills you need for product management, and then if you get an internship or a job, then you can explore further. But
I would add that, yeah, I would just add that like product management, you like, yes, it can be taught in schools, but it is very experiential, like as a discipline, right? Like it is not that you read a book and then you become like a good product manager. You kind of need to sort of live it, right? Like talk to customers, like figure out, build something, iterate, etc. And this is where in sort of whichever school that you're attending or will attend, take advantage of things like internships just to get an idea of what it's like to be like a product manager and have that sort of delivery on your sort of CV.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I find maybe confusing, and maybe you can expand on it, is what's the difference between project management and program management? I'm sorry.
Let's take that. Yeah.
This one, yeah.
So it's interesting, right? Like there's a lot of role titles that begin with a P: product, program, project, etc. So product is very much about sort of what we talked about, like customer needs, etc. Project is typically something that has sort of a defined start and end date and a scope, and you're managing sort of execution of that, right? Start, end date, scope. How do we actually ship something and get that done? Program is more about sort of from sort of how I think about it, looking at the portfolio of projects, right? So how are you joining the dots across all of these things that have discrete start end dates with a scope? And all of these things need to fit together, because ultimately what you're delivering for the customer needs to be something that's shippable, tracked, measured KPIs, etc., and sort of all the above. So you'll find sort of all three types of roles in organizations.
Yeah, just to add to that and just highlight the difference. I think product management is more customer focused.
Yes.
You want to emphasize product market fit, user experience, feature development. But program management would be more process focused, that you want to do certain things in a certain timeline and to deliver on that.
So interesting how all these P's come together for the main P, which is profit, later on.
Yeah.
All right. So, one of the things that I think a lot of people are curious about is how the pre MBA experience and the skills that you bring in can be advantageous when you're trying to work towards these career goals. First, this question is to Giri. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about your journey, because you had like an extensive experience before as well, and how
Yeah.
that helped you after completing your MBA, and how you're using that in your current role right now, and a little bit about your journey and the challenges you faced.
Yeah, sure. So my undergrad was in pure sort of engineering. So it was at Imperial, so based in London, so electronic engineering and computer science. So again, very technical sort of background, like going into sort of my role in financial services for the first 5 sort of years of my career at Deutsche Bank. And added on sort of the MBA to that, and now in obviously sort of a more senior like product strategy type role. And I find it very useful because it enables me to really focus on like a T-shaped type of career, because I have the engineering depth to talk to scrum teams, etc., or have an idea of like when an effort estimate comes in, like roughly like what that means. So I'm able to have engineering level sort of conversations, but I'm also through the MBA able to see that sort of horizontal like strategic direction. And being at that intersection is extremely powerful in terms of a mix of skills, to be honest. So I leverage that all the time because it means that I can build trust with sort of engineering teams really quickly, speak their language, adapt my communication style depending on sort of the technical sort of nature of the audience, but then also do the more stakeholder management, like pure sort of strategy type work as well. So I found it quite useful to enable me to sort of flex my style depending on the stakeholder that I'm dealing with. And for me, like the real advantage has been you're talking sort of the same language, right? And you end up getting quite a lot of trust from sort of engineering teams because they feel that you've been in the trenches as well, right? And you are in the trenches with them. And having that I think has been sort of extremely useful.
Hmm. So what I get from here is that you need to be able to speak different languages. I think to the business teams and then the engineering teams and even your customer, and kind of like
Yeah.
marry all those. Amol, like the same question to you, but with a little bit of nuance here in terms of you had this experience as a product manager. How
Hmm.
has it helped you to shape your goals and also probably to choose something at SRA right now
Hmm.
and also think deeper about your career goals?
Yeah, so I had product management experience when I was coming to the MBA. But the first thing that I did when I came to the MBA was look for mentors in product space because I wanted to move up the ladder and do product strategy. Also, when I was learning with the courses, I want because similar to Giri, I can also speak the tech language because I'm an engineer. So I have that depth. But again, I think like product management. I achieve is divided into four things. It's product execution, it's customer insight, it's strategy, and it's influencing your stakeholders. And the last two things was something which I had not learned when I was in a tech school. Uh, what is strategy and how I can like what is stakeholder management? And I think these two things was a clear gap which the MBA could fill, and then I can experience it with internships and job roles and like just get my hands dirty.
Bear in mind that we're not saying that you have to have a technical background to go into product management, right? Like, to sort of the point at the start, it kind of depends on the company, on how they think about sort of that role. And there might be sort of roles that are related to sort of product management that would have, that are perfectly capable to sort of do really, really well with a pure non-technical pre-MBA background.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Sure. So the best one I can think of actually is sort of a role that I find is vastly underrated by MBA students is chief of staff. So, chief of staff type roles where you're more bringing together sort of the product teams and engineering to sort of make something happen, right? So chief of staff, business operations type roles, which, it's a role profile you'll see a lot in product type sort of companies, etc. Product marketing, sort of we talked about earlier, where you're a little bit more sort of on the advocation side of sort of the product. Some people might have more specific like data skills, so there'll be huge amounts of roles in like data analytics, which is a lot more on like KPIs and OKRs and sort of measurement. So really, in that product sphere, there's a huge amount of sort of roles to sort of think about, and it's not just like one size fits all.
Hmm. But I had a follow up here in terms of how does it differ between a startup versus something which is more established, like say your Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc.
Um, I think the one fundamental
Yeah,
difference
go
is
for it.
yeah, if because if you're in a startup, then you'll be wearing multiple hats as a product manager. So you might be starting with the ideation of the product, and then you might even go to sales and the loop of customer saying something, you thinking what you can do, and just repeat. Uh, in big tech companies, your product might be limited to certain features. For example, if you're doing Instagram, your product might be just a like, comment, share, versus a startup where your product might be the whole product that you're selling.
100%. And I'd
Giri,
just
if you want
add
to.
like the title of sort of product management startups, to Amel's point. it's probably just in a title, to be honest. You'll be doing sort of 17 different roles probably. Right. So because ultimately, like from a startup standpoint, you need to get from 0 to 1 like really, really quickly. And I think like that's quite a nice way of sort of thinking about it as well. Sort of when you're trying to make sort of impact in your career, there's some situations where you're building something from 0 to 1, right? Like nothing exists and you're taking it from 0 to 1. There's other situations which you're building from 1 to 2. Both have their own challenges, etc. And especially in sort of startups and sort of more matrix sort of organizations, you'll find that elements such as like the stakeholder management, the advocacy sort of piece becomes a lot more important sort of as a skill in a product organization.
This seems to relate also to having, when you have the MBA, that you can move into different directions within product management. Can you elaborate at all on some of those directions or how you could pivot into other roles in product with the MBA?
Yeah, sure. So I think like, the way that I kind of approached sort of the MBA in relation to sort of product was, as we talked about, there are a lot of different types of sort of roles and products, but ultimately what you kind of want on your CV at the end of any sort of MBA program is less about sort of one specific role, but more about like, can this person add impact and deliver stuff at different stages of a company's growth, to our point around startups, scale ups versus sort of large scale organizations, different regions if possible, and different industries, right? Like I had no like media experience per se, like before joining sort of Sky, but actually throughout my sort of CV and very consciously through the MBA, built up sort of a set of skills where I was able to do sort of product in sort of a startup, whereas was very 0 to 1, product in more of a matrix company, whereas very 1 to 2, and you have to do a lot of the stakeholder and piece. So it's really more about like building that diverse sort of set of skills during sort of the program on top of what schools offer, such as what we talked about, like specific courses and upskilling type of areas. So I think for me it's more about like getting into that product sphere, and then navigation of sort of the roles tends to be sort of highly like company dependent, because also bear in mind that this is a new role and a function, right? So companies are also still like figuring it out. It's not like, for example, in consulting and banking, where you have a very, very structured sort of corporate path that happens to sort of pretty much be mirrored across most companies sort of in that space, whereas roles in sort of tech and product aren't really like that. So yeah, try not to plan your sort of career pathway sort of too into the detail, because it will change, and what prepares you for that change is to have that diversity and the type of impact that you can create, and you're comfortable with that.
Sorry, I think Bara, you're mute.
Something.
It happens. I mean, that diversity that you're talking about, it's like, I don't know if you planned on getting an MBA and going into product management when you were in engineering school, right? So, we never know. Often we don't necessarily know where the path is going to take us, even though we might have a kind of idea of where the direction is that we're going.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I had this question to both of you. Who wants to take it first? What do you exactly mean by the CEO of the product? For somebody who might be like, thinking about this whole space from a different angle, what do you exactly mean by it?
Amol, do you want to kick off?
CEO of a product?
Mm-hmm.
It was a question to you.
Yeah, the product manager being the CEO of the product. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially I think in startups where you're doing everything. So like a product life cycle is idea of a product, then you design the UI UX sketches. This is how my product should look like. Then you test it with some users, then you get feedback, then you build your product and so on and so forth. Uh, CEO of a product means that you are looking over the entire life cycle of that product. So from the birth of the product to its like supposedly death, you're seeing and you're trying to analyze and make it better and better for the customers. So and that in that regard, it's the role product management is very entrepreneurial as well, because it's up to you. Like the demise or the growth of the product depends on you mostly, or like multiple product managers, but who are looking uh, after that product. So yeah, in a nutshell.
And it's non-linear, right? So it's not like, oh, we found sort of a customer need, we built something, we've shipped something, and then we move on. You're always test iterating, learning from sort of customer feedback and customer insight, and then you're continuously sort of evolving. And this is where sort of a lot of the skills that it talks about around like data and KPI tracking really comes in, right? Because ultimately customers might not necessarily tell you the feedback, but they will demonstrate it in terms of behaviors that you can track and measure.
Yeah. So what would you, I just want, you're getting some kudos over here. I'm going to put this up just because it's nice to, like, if we're going to think about MBA Waves as a product, our customers are saying that you're totally on point. So, because we're the CEOs of MBA Waves. So they're happy with that information. The people will see that in the comments. Can you talk a little bit about the biggest challenges that are faced by someone coming in with a non-technical background, a little bit more? I know, for example, that my cousin has a PhD in economics, and she's actually working in product management for a company. And it's super interesting when I spoke with her because she comes from a completely different field. In fact, we should have her on as a guest. And she's coming in as an economist talking about the customer and talking about the roles of the customer and the trends and the cycles. And so it's interesting just to go in a little bit deeper with what are some of the challenges that someone is going to face if they don't have that technical background.
I think like it's a mindset thing, to be honest, right? So I think if we're going in and, we talked about sort of the requirements of the roles might be sort of different in different companies, but it's also a mindset sort of element, like, regardless of sort of industry, if you are focused on sort of what your customers want, like how you can sort of delight them, how you can track success and measure that, that's ultimately sort of what you're doing. The sort of the technical background can help in sort of the skills and relationship building within sort of the teams and building that sort of credibility, but you can build that sort of organically sort of in an organization, right? So I think this is where sort of how you pitch yourself and like come across is really key, because you're looking for sort of transferable skills, whatever sort of degree you're doing and whatever industry you're going into, frankly. And you can always be skewed towards sort of certain disciplines, like I could skew my product experience to be more strategy focused as sort of a lens, and that's how I come across. Or you could look at it from a pure sort of product lens, etc. Regardless, I think purely like getting into sort of product roles with that sort of type of background, I think a lot of the CVs that I see, for example, the really good sort of product focused CVs are all about sort of what have we built, what have we shipped, how have I measured it, right? Like really, really consistently. That doesn't have to be in a tech company, right? Like that could be writing, like that could be any industry, that could be your own business. So ultimately, it's, I think, like, working on that sort of stakeholder management and being able to sort of flex your language depending on sort of stakeholder is really key. But that's something that the MBA teaches you quite well, to be honest, right? Because you're in cohorts of people from multiple backgrounds where you're having to alter sort of the level of what you're talking about, explain complex stuff to people who don't understand it. So you're learning all these skills in an MBA anyway.
Right. And when you mentioned the chief of staff also, right? The chief of staff has to really understand all of these other languages of where people are coming from, even if they're not fluent in all of them, right? They have to get a sense. And I think on any job, you're always learning, ideally, more about how to best communicate with the people that you're working with to be more effective and efficient.
I feel a lot of it is, by the way, is also tied to emotional intelligence, right? Which again is something that the MBA sort of really, really sort of teaches you, because ultimately, what are the motivations of the customers? What are the motivations of the engineering teams you're working with? What motivates prioritization of sort of features? Like, if you're able to sort of understand the underlying like motivations of the people you're working with, that's going to really help you out.
So that's pretty interesting. And I think like one thing I learned more of is the variety of skills. And as Amol, you pointed out, being entrepreneurial in nature and kind of, the image that comes to my head right now is like product managers seems to be like Hermes, the messengers of the gods moving around and making sure that all things are working properly. But the
You can
question
say that.
here would be like, what other roles do you guys think? Like, I know chief of staff, and you mentioned about product strategy, and you mentioned about product marketing separately, and so on. What other roles come to your mind? So, Amol, you want to take it first?
Uh, I would say customer success manager is also something. If your product is very customer, I think every product should be customer facing, but if you're in a company which really loves to get feedback from the customer and data points from customers, so customer success manager is something. Um, Product management, program management also can fit here because we were talking about the three Ps, four Ps. Uh, it's a branch. It's not purely product management. So if you're non-tech, you can do program management, which we've already talked about. If you're someone who is focused more on design and UI UX, then you can take look at products from that angle of designing, like talk to your design teams and be more. I don't know what's the name of that uh, job role would be, but like really depends on your skill set and your strength as well. If you're more data focused, then you can do the data aspect of it. You can collect data, analyze data, and tell the engineers and people what this data means. Uh, yeah, so it's also like because it's such a sphere that Giri said that you can pick and choose your strengths, and then you can go more to that side of the whole sphere.
Hmm. So it looks like you can also customize it, right? And Giri, like, what more would you like to add in the roles?
Yeah, I would also say like, don't discount sort of roles which own a P&L, right? So pure like commercial type sort of roles and sales roles, which are actually sort of really nice on sort of the other end of the spectrum, might be slightly outside of the product sphere, but will teach you sort of so much about sort of how products actually like get to market, right? So we'll go to GTM type roles, growth,
True.
which initially like in some companies now like a whole function, right? Like there's like chief growth officer, etc. And so on. So even sort of those types of roles could be sort of really, really interesting and quite good for like an MBA sort of skill set as well.
Hmm.
So I've got a question since we're heading into round one. I know, Amol, that you had project management experience before going into your program, and I'm curious whether this was something that you highlighted in your application essays. Is this something that you talked about as experience? And Gary, I don't think did you have project management experience before as
Yeah.
well?
So yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious how that played a role in your applications.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, I did product for 5 years. Parallelly, I was building my startup as well. So I used both those stories to talk about how I've been doing product management and how all the skills were transferable to my startup and what I want to do in the future with like I have X number of skills. I need certain Y number of skills from the MBA, and I'll like, cook them up and use these skills to build something for the future. So like this was my pitch for my essays. Uh, Talking more about entrepreneurship because ISADE is a school which really values entrepreneurship, and I'm pretty sure LB is also really values entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
So yeah, really highlighting on product, taking it to entrepreneurship, and saying that this is what I'll do if I get the MBA admission, and yeah, take it from there.
That's helpful.
Then
Thank
for
you.
me, it was kind of like the other sort of side of the coin where it was more about like the impact that I can bring on to the sort of the school. So it's like, right, I have this background in products, this background in tech. There's an opportunity to sort of work with the school to really like further what LBS does in sort of this space. So it was more from like that lens. So ironically, I didn't take many of the product courses at LBS because I had that knowledge, but I knew that that was sort of the skill set that was needed, right, for sort of careers in sort of the product space. So the sort of the pitch, as it were, on my side was a lot more about, yes, I have that background, I can leverage that for the benefit of sort of other students and sort of create something. So yeah, it was useful.
So I agree, Giri. I agree that you have used it well, and as an entrepreneur, you set up the media, product, and technology at LBS.
Yeah.
So, how did your product background help there?
Yeah, I think, as always, right, it's about sort of focusing on the customers. I remember sort of speaking to LBS, talking to them about like, hey, we should sort of start courses in sort of SQL, and said like, go straight to the customers. What do the customers want, right? Like 400 students want to do SQL. This makes sense. So again, like it's the paradigm, right? Like I think that's what both Amol and I are trying to get across. It's that sort of way of thinking where you're looking at like your stakeholders, you're advocating for the customers, which in this case are sort of students. Like, what do they need, and what do and how best can we sort of meet those needs? Like that's ultimately like what product is, and it's exactly that sort of framework that helped sort of push this working collaboratively with sort of the school.
Why don't we talk about, maybe this might be one of our last questions as we start to wrap it up, but how do you see project management actually evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, the roles in product management?
Giri, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting question, right? And I think, going forward, like product managers need to really be a Swiss Army knife, have multiple skills and wear sort of multiple hats, right? And it's not only about now like focusing on sort of your lane, but actually what do customers want, like the global nature of sort of business more sort of in general, how new technologies can help meet those sort of needs, etc. So it's a constant sort of that pace of sort of innovation you're having to sort of keep up with. But I also find like in general in product we're doing sort of very multiple hats, right? That multiple hat wearing has really like actually become a thing now. So it's not like you can go and say like, right, I'm a product manager in a silo, I'm going to do customer research and then I'm going to do this and then build something. That really doesn't work anymore and won't work sort of in future. It's about how you sort of bring together everyone across that product development lifecycle, have a great relationship with design, have a great relationship with sort of engineering, figure out what architects, how we sort of think about like platform architecture. So I think it's going to become much more of a role which is more about dot connecting. And conveniently, an MBA is great to teach skills on how to connect dots. There.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think because AI is rising, there's a no-code revolution. So I think building products are becoming easy. It's more what customers want. So I think the mindset that we've been talking about, which should be customer focused. What do customers want, and how can we bring that product to the customers? That will be highlighted more now because it's easier to build products. So the customers are becoming more sophisticated in that terms that they have a lot of options. So what are you doing better? How are you getting the data from the customers, and how are you making your product better than the others in the market? That is also a skill, and that is, I think, it's a mindset that has to be developed and has to be trained like every day. Okay, like this is something that I want to do. This is my customers want, and just focus on that and building a product like better and better.
Think about a nice analogy, by the way. Think about sort of the camera industry. Like 10 years ago, from a sort of a product standpoint, right? Like to get to sort of take a photo, you needed like a digital SLR or like you had to buy a camera, etc. Whereas now you can just use your phone. So that act of taking a photo is incredibly easy and democratized. Building products, as Amol said, has literally become like that. Right? Like I could spin up something like right now, like tonight, because there's so many tools and resources that are available.
Yeah.
But you kind of get to the stage of why, and this is where it goes back to sort of that customer centricity. Everyone can do, like more and more people can do product management, right, and build stuff from 0 to 1 and a lot more. Now it's about sort of how are you finding that sort of insight and digging deeper into what sort of customers actually sort of need. And to the quote that's on screen, like this is exactly the thing about sort of insight, right? Like customers won't tell this to you. This is about how you use data, how you use behavior, how you use research, how you tie that together to get ahead of the curve and see what customers like, how you're actually solving their problems. And it's not just them telling you what they want.
Then we also have to look at the schools, right? And how are the schools going to then create the courses and the support beyond the experiential piece that you said is so important in this field. How are the schools going to respond, right? There probably wasn't a class at the school about cameras and then how to make them better, but there was a need to democratize it more, or to bring together technology, right? So that you can do lots of different things with your phone.
Yeah.
So is there anything that we did not talk about that you want to throw into the ring before we wrap up? I'll take that as a no.
Cool. Yeah.
But I just have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I think to both of you, Amol, what are you thinking about in terms of career goals after your MBA?
Good question.
So yeah, so but now I want to move up the ladder and want to look for product strategy roles. I like more strategy in general because I have a experience in a gaming company. So right now I have an internship in a gaming company in France, which would start in August, and it is uh, in product strategy. So it's the right hand of the co-founder. So I think it's more about the horizontal aspect of product management, where it's more stakeholder management and connecting the dots, as Giri said, and just to see how the strategy of the company can be in for the future, rather than going into a particular game, which is a product here, and checking how this game can be better. So I think more product strategy and maybe then strategy roles and like so on and so forth.
Excellent. Wishing you good luck on that. And Giri, this is, I think, why our MBA Waves perspectives and hopefuls come here, which is to know how has the MBA helped you post graduation in your role, and how have you leveraged the alumni and the whole LBS community, your faculty, the courses, and everything else.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's no sort of one answer to this, right? Because it's really sort of a mix. Like the first thing is, during the program, it was about sort of that exploration journey of doing sort of multiple internships, having all these experiential sort of opportunities, such as like tracks, meeting sort of folks in industry, etc., to build that network within sort of London, within like the product sphere, and get connected to sort of alumni. I actually got my current role through an alumni referral. So again, like building that sort of network within sort of the school and broader was really key. And I think, ultimately, like an MBA teaches you how to think and not what to think. And more so than, many sectors, product management is all about a mindset, right? It's like how to think about like the customers, etc. So I find like the way that I'm approaching problems, the way that I'm dealing with sort of stakeholders, the way I'm flexing sort of skills in that sort of T-shaped like career, the way that we're able to sort of connect the dots across like engineering and all of these sort of functions, the soft skills sort of element of the MBA has really, really helped. And coupled that with that storytelling with data. And I think like that's been a really sort of key point, right? So it's like, what does the data sort of tell you, and being very data driven in sort of decision making and learning that sort of as a skill and bringing that in to sort of the product sphere has been really, really sort of key.
Well, thank you both so much. That's all the time that we have today. It's great to meet you both, and Giri and Amol, we're really excited to see where you guys go. We should talk to you in like a year or two and see what you have to say about product management then. For those of you who are watching us, if you like today's episode, please give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to MBA Waves to stay on top of the latest business trends and the world of applying to MBAs, business and education. And finally, don't forget to check us out next week, the same time and the same place. For full access to upcoming and past episodes, please go to our website, mbawaves.com, and have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you.